All right, so I've been working at this small family-owned cafe for like 7 years now. Started back in high school, kept it going through college. It's nothing fancy, just one of those places that's been around forever, with regulars who've been coming since before I was even born. Now I'm technically management. I handle closing, pricing decisions, and locking up at night. The owner's mom, who's usually around to do all the closing stuff, has been in Arizona for a few months visiting family. That means I'm closing alone most nights. And let me tell you, it's been getting weird. So the routine's pretty simple. Walk the cooks and busboys out through the back, lock up behind them, then head to the front, grab the cash drawer, credit card slips, and keys, and make my way to the office to lock everything up for the night. Here's the thing. This office light, it's never supposed to be off. Ever. I've been told it stays on at all times. Doesn't matter if the place is closed, doesn't matter if no one's in there, the light stays on. The owner's mom insists on it. I don't know why, and honestly, I never really questioned it. Until the other night. I go back there, get ready to unlock the door, and boom, the light is off. Not dimmed, not flickering, completely off. And I know for a fact it was on earlier because I was in there. I stop, just standing there for a second, my hand hovering over the doorknob, feeling this weird pit in my stomach. I check my keys. Maybe I grabbed the wrong set? Nope. I'm the only one who has them anyway. Finally, I flicked the light switch back on, and yeah, it was definitely turned off. Here's the thing, I've always heard the stories. Supposedly, about 9 years ago, an older guy had a heart attack and died in the bathroom. Ever since, people joke that the place is haunted. I never took it seriously. Yeah, I'd hear some weird stuff, like the occasional clang of kitchen pots after everyone had gone, or the sound of the ticket printer spitting out random orders when nobody was near the register. Even the toilets flushing by themselves after hours. But this was different. Fast forward to last night. I was closing up with the head chef, and as we were about to leave, the interior restaurant door slammed shut in front of us. Hard. We just stood there staring at each other like, did that just happen? There was no one else in the building. No wind, because that door is behind another glass door that leads outside, and that one was already locked. At this point, I'm beyond creeped out. And the weirdest part? Ever since the owner's mom left town, things have been escalating. More noises. More weird feelings like someone's watching me. More unexplained stuff happening when I'm alone. Last Friday, I was finishing up in the back when I heard what sounded like footsteps in the dining area. Heavy ones, like someone wearing boots. I froze. I was 100% sure I had locked the front door. Heart pounding, I grabbed a knife from the prep station and crept forward, trying to stay quiet. I peeked around the corner into the dining area, and there was no one there. Nothing. No signs of movement, just the tables and chairs, the dim lighting casting long, weird shadows across the floor. But the air felt heavy, like someone had just been there. That's when I started hearing whispering. Not loud. Just faint enough that I couldn't make out words, but I could feel it. Like a conversation happening just beyond my range of hearing. I backed up, trying to convince myself I was imagining things, and practically sprinted to grab my stuff. As I turned to leave, I caught something in the reflection of the glass door. Just for a second. A shadowy figure, standing in the hallway near the office. Tall, unmoving. I spun around, but there was nothing there. I didn't stick around to investigate. I locked up and bolted out of there so fast I barely remembered to set the alarm. And now I'm at a crossroads. Do I suck it up and keep closing alone, or do I start making the back-of-house guys wait for me so we can leave together? Because at this point, I'm starting to think I'm not actually closing up alone. And I don't know who or what is staying behind after hours. Then, last night, something even stranger happened. I had decided to stick around a little longer, just to prove to myself that I was imagining things. I sat at one of the booths near the window, scrolling through my phone, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in my stomach. That's when I heard it. Soft, deliberate knocking. Not at the front door, but from inside. I turned my head slowly toward the kitchen. The knocking came again. 3 precise taps, like someone knocking to be let in. I was frozen, my body tense. I wanted to believe it was just some old pipes settling, but deep down, I knew better. I forced myself to stand and move toward the sound, every nerve in my body screaming at me to stop. The knocking stopped. Just silence. I reached the swinging kitchen doors and hesitated. Then, just as I pushed them open, all the pans in the kitchen clattered at once, like someone had grabbed the metal racks and shaken them violently. I ran, didn't even bother locking the back door. I didn't care. I just bolted out, jumped into my car, and sped off. I called my boss that night and told him I wasn't closing alone anymore. I didn't care if I got written up. I didn't care if I sounded crazy, because something is in that cafe. And it doesn't want to be alone either. I've been a corrections officer for years, and honestly, I never really bought into all the ghost stories people tell. But after working so many night shifts, I can't exactly ignore the weird stuff anymore. This isn't some horror movie script. This is just real life in a place that holds a lot of bad history. My shifts start at 8 p.m. and don't end until 6 a.m. At night, it's just a skeleton crew overseeing hundreds of locked-up inmates. Everything should be quiet, but it never really is. The walls in this place hold a lot of noise, even when nobody is moving. Some of it is just normal prison sounds. The occasional cough, the shuffle of someone shifting in their bunk. But then there are the other sounds, the ones you can't explain. There's one wing in particular that I try to avoid as much as possible. The third landing of that wing has a weird vibe, like something is watching from the corner, just out of sight. The feeling is so strong that I stopped cutting through there altogether. Instead, I take the longer route if I have to check on an emergency call. And it's not just me. Other officers have mentioned feeling watched in the same spot. Some refuse to go near it alone. Then there's the first landing. Coming off the stairs, it's like the air gets thick, like you're pushing against something invisible. It's the kind of feeling that makes your skin crawl. I don't know what it is, but I don't like it. I've had empty cells set off emergency alarms, cell doors slam even though everything is locked up tight, and I've even caught movement on CCTV when there's nobody there. I tell myself it's just shadows playing tricks on me. I have to. Because the alternative is way worse. For the longest time, I never talked about it. I mean, who wants to admit they're scared of the dark when you're supposed to be the one keeping order in a place full of criminals? But one night, I accidentally spooked another officer on patrol, and we got to joking about ghosts. That's when they brought up the haunted wing. I didn't even say anything, I just nodded, and they immediately said, "You mean the third landing, don't you?" That was all I needed to hear. I started asking around, and it turns out nearly everyone working night shifts has a story about that wing. One officer said he heard a cell door slam, twice. Went to check, and nothing was open. Another said he was cutting through the third landing when one of the heavy security gates swung shut behind him. Those gates don't move on their own. They're solid metal, heavy as hell. There's no way that should have happened unless someone, or something, closed it. The weirdest thing happened to me when I was making my rounds. To get to one section, you have to go through a wooden door and a metal gate. I didn't have my flashlight, so I opened both, stepped inside, and reached for the light switch. As soon as I did, the wooden door slammed shut behind me with so much force that I jumped. I have never moved so fast in my life, locking up and getting the hell out of there. After that, I spent the rest of my shift talking to other officers, swapping stories. Everyone said the same thing. The third landing is bad news, and the first landing isn't much better. I started paying more attention to the security cameras, and sure enough, one night I saw movement on the first landing. Someone walking toward the office. I switched to the next camera feed to see where they were going. Nothing. Checked the playback. Still nothing. One night, I got bold. Or maybe just stupid. I decided to sit near the third landing, just to see if I could catch anything. I sat there in a chair, flashlight resting on my knee, listening. It was silent. Too silent. Even in a prison, there's always some kind of noise, but in that moment, it was like the entire building had held its breath. Then the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the far end of the landing. I aimed my flashlight, but the beam only cut through the air, showing empty space. The footsteps didn't stop. They kept coming closer. My heart started hammering in my chest. I stood up, scanning the corridor, expecting to see an inmate somehow out of their cell. But the cells were all locked. A shadow moved at the edge of my vision. I turned the flashlight toward it, but there was nothing there. Just the cold, heavy air pressing in around me. Then, just as I was about to convince myself I had imagined it, I heard the most chilling thing yet, breathing. Slow, ragged breathing, right behind me. I spun around, but again, nothing. I backed away, never taking my eyes off the hallway. The feeling of being watched was so intense I could barely breathe. I reached for my radio to call another officer, but the second I did, my radio crackled with static, followed by a whisper. I didn't wait to hear more. I bolted down the stairs and straight into the control room. My shift partner saw my face and didn't even ask. He just nodded. The third landing? I nodded back. Since then, I refuse to be alone in that wing at night. Something is there. I don't know what it wants, but I know it's watching. And I know it's waiting. I still don't go through the third landing at night. Some things just aren't worth the risk. I work night shifts at a care home, and honestly, I never thought I'd be the kind of person who believes in ghosts. But after everything I've experienced, I can't ignore it anymore. The spirits in that place seem to have a thing for messing with me, and I don't know why. At first, it was small things. Footsteps behind me when I was alone, light tapping on my head like someone was trying to get my attention. I brushed it off, convinced it was just my imagination. But then I switched to night shifts, and things got worse. The first time I saw her was about a year ago. I was walking down the stairs when I glanced to my right. There's a corridor there, leading to a dead end. That's where I saw her. She was almost glowing, her body pale white, with stringy hair falling over her shoulders. No face, just a blank, featureless void where her eyes and mouth should have been. She was peeking out of the bathroom doorway, watching me. I turned away for just a second to call for my coworker, but when I looked back, she was gone. She never really scared me, though. She just existed. Like she wasn't harmful, just lingering. I never saw her again, but I always had the feeling she was still there. Then there's the Shadow Man. He's different. He doesn't just linger, he follows. He watches from corners, always just out of reach. Other staff have seen him too, especially one of my coworkers. He gets the worst of it. One night, we were cleaning the corridor near the living rooms, just talking, venting about work. The spirits don't like negativity, apparently, because all at once, every single living room started making noise. Loud creaks, rustling sounds. The air turned heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. I tried to be brave. I told them to stop. The noise died down and I turned back to my coworker. That's when he said it. "He's behind you." I didn't look. I didn't want to see. But the noises picked up again, louder this time, as if the spirits were responding to our conversation. Every time we started complaining, the sound returned. We learned not to talk about certain things after that. The scariest encounters always happen in the same places: the kitchen, the staff room, and the bathroom where I first saw the woman. I once heard a man yelling, "Help me," in a corridor filled with sleeping residents. There were no men awake, and the voice didn't belong to anyone in the home. Another time, I was walking out of the kitchen when all the cutlery started shaking violently in the drawers. I refused to be in that kitchen alone after dark ever again. Sometimes, when we pass by the common areas, we catch glimpses of people sitting in chairs just at the edge of our vision. But when we turn to look, there's nothing there. And the whistling, it's the worst. It's so close, like someone standing right next to you, breathing it into your ear. But you have to pretend not to hear it, because acknowledging it just makes it worse. One of the worst nights I ever had was when I was working with another carer. We were assisting a resident when I started hearing loud banging from the corridor. My coworker didn't hear it at first, so I thought I was imagining it. But then it got louder. It sounded like someone was breaking in. We checked the front entrance. Nothing. The alarms were on. Every door was locked. There was no way anyone could have come inside. As we walked back, we passed the bathroom where I had seen the faceless woman. The door was closed this time. Then, out of nowhere, the door started shaking violently, slamming against the frame like something was trying to get out. We ran. I don't know what was in there, and I don't want to know. Another night, we were finishing up our rounds when we heard it. A woman's voice, repeating the same words over and over. Help me, help me, help me. At first, we thought it was a resident. We checked every single room. Everyone was asleep. But the voice kept going. We listened closely, and that's when we realized the voice didn't belong to anyone in the home. It was unfamiliar, distant, yet so clear. We never left each other's side for the rest of the night. The last straw for me was the night I was sitting alone in the staff room. I was exhausted, half asleep, when I heard my name whispered right into my ear. I ignored it. I had to. But the air in the room felt like it had shifted, like something else was there with me. In the laundry room, I would hear the sounds of walking frames moving when no one was awake. Upstairs, there were nights when we heard screaming. Not a normal scream, but something hollow, distant, echoing through the halls. We would chase the sound, only for it to shift to the opposite end of the building, always just out of reach. One night, during my break, I decided to step outside to get some fresh air. The courtyard was empty, the cold air biting against my skin. As I stood there, just taking in the silence, I noticed movement in one of the upstairs windows. It was the room of a resident who had passed away months ago. A silhouette stood by the window, staring down at me. I knew no one was in there. The room had been cleared out. I blinked, and the figure was gone. Later that same night, I was doing one last round before my shift ended. As I walked down the main corridor, I heard shuffling ahead. It sounded like someone dragging their feet. I turned the corner, expecting to see a resident out of bed, but instead, the hallway was empty. The sound, however, continued, growing fainter, moving toward the locked ward where no one had been for years. I left the care home for a while, thinking distance would help, but I still think about it. About the spirits that knew my name, about the shadow in the corners, about the faceless woman who only appeared once, but who I know is still there watching. I could go back anytime, but I don't think I ever will.